How should a Christian parent help their family use technology, specifically parents to children? That's the question I want to focus on today. Let's take a few minutes to think about some principles from God's Word. And I hope this will be a help for you. Remember, our online teaching is not supposed to be disconnected from our whole person. So if you have a question about this teaching, reach out to me in real life. I'd love to talk more, help you follow Jesus in the situation you're going through. All right, if we're going to think about technology, we're going to have to think first about work and creation, because technology is really a subset of work and creation. Now, I like to draw, so that's why we're going to use this. If you are just listening in, then you can check out the picture later. But when God created the world, he put man and woman over the place called the Garden of Eden. You can read about this in Genesis chapter 1 through 3. In fact, you might already know about it, but I'm going to give ourselves a tree here, and I'm going to give them, let's say, a couple sprouts of a corn or wheat. All right? So they've got fields, and they're working, and they have this opportunity from God. They're created by God, and they're told in Genesis chapter 1 that they're supposed to rule over the world and subdue it, okay? So this is a huge principle for using technology. God said, let us make mankind in our image and in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds of the sky and over the livestock and all the wild animals and over the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves along the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the sky and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has life or breath in it, I give the green plants for food. And it was so. And God saw that he made, and it was very good. There was evening, there was morning, the sixth day. I mean, this creation account helps us see a lot of things. But one thing I want to laser in on is mankind was created in God's image, and that means that they were given some of God's capacity, and they were supposed to reflect God's character. You can think about it that way. They were given some of God's ability, and they were supposed to reflect what God is like. And God tells them, take the area you're in and reflect what I'm like through your capacity. That's about showing God's glory. That's what the Bible tells us, is that we are supposed to show God's glory. But we're also supposed to reproduce so that there would be more humans over more parts of the planet showing God's glory by using their capacity and reflection of his character. That's just a loose way to think about it, okay? There's work to do. Adam and Eve have been given work to do in their specific garden. And in Genesis chapter 2, we hear God give them instructions about that. So they're still in submission to him, right? He is the king over all. But here's the deal. People go, well, what's the work to do if everything's beautiful and wonderful? Well, they're supposed to subdue the earth. They're supposed to, I would say, draw out the potential that God has loaded in it. This apple tree exists, but there's never been an apple pie. And think about this. Apple pie requires invention, right? The oven, or some kind of way to bake an apple pie. A knife, some form of tool to cut the apples and slice the apples. My wife has this really cool little, it's like this thing, a corer, where you put it on the counter and it suction cups to the counter, and then you put the apple in, and then the kids love to twist it, and it cores out the apple, but it also strips off the skin so that it's ready for the pie. And then at the end, you got the slicer. Well, those are all inventions that are not disconnected. They're tools that are not separate. Oh, my pen is being weird. From the idea that Adam invents a shovel and that Eve then takes a wheelbarrow, right, and says, oh, this will help us to do the work God has given us. It's tools that can be used to shape the world and to aid us in the task God has given, to help us. All right? Technology is a subset of our tools, and that is a piece of our work. Work is about adding value as we've been given responsibilities, entrusted with materials and abilities for the glory of God. Now, we know by the time we get to Genesis chapter 3 that the world is drastically different because Adam and Eve rebelled against God. They created this barrier of sin and death where all of a sudden they've tried to be king themselves, and they've ruined the creation they've been entrusted to under what's called the curse. Now work is a lot harder. Thorns and thistles will plague them as they work. It will cause sweat for them. It calls for even, you'd think, more tools and more invention, more creativity to try and keep the deterioration of work at bay. And that's where we really probably feel technology are these tools that can get some work done that we used to have to do, and now it does it for us. Like the little Zumba, right? Roomba, sorry. The vacuum, right? I don't have one, but some of my friends have that vacuum, and they let it walk around their house and sweep up on their own. And we have to tend to it and make it. And this is, in some ways, a great invention and piece of technology. The ability to communicate across time and space with our phones, like the way I'm recording right now. This is a tool that is enabling us to do things. But this is where this is why I wanted to highlight technology as a tool, Christian parents. Because what can easily happen is if we have forgotten God, right? Sin isn't just about disrespecting God, it's about disregarding God in the world he made. And I believe a lot of technology is actually enabling us to disregard and disrespect God. Or the way we use technology involves disregarding and then many times disrespecting God in the world he made. What we need to recognize is every tool needs to be taken and evaluated if it helps us to add value to the world God gave us. Add value to the responsibility, the little slice of the world that he entrusted to us, the little gifts and abilities that he has given us. And I think that rule of thumb right there is actually going to be very powerful for you in evaluating when and how you use technology. All right? Because things that get easier don't always make things better. We know sometimes God uses struggles to grow us. That doesn't mean that you should go cut your foot off because it would make things harder and therefore it would be better. But what we have to recognize is that there's times when, like, the shovel and the wheelbarrow helped Adam accomplish his work, let's say. But what about the robotic-powered turbine where Adam decides he's going to go into the house and he's just going to watch Netflix while a robot that he invented goes and does the work? That is a place where we'd start to see, yes, the invention can add value, because you know what? It's cool that robotic machine could do some of the work that he wouldn't have to do. But Adam is letting, in that story, the technology replace him, not increase his ability to add value. If he is using these tools to then stop pursuing what God has given him in his life to add value, and just to intake, just to consume, just to make the world more about himself, that actually is going to be a danger, right? Easy everywhere. The temptation is then that we just sit down and consume. We need to look for the way that tools help us to actually accomplish what God has called us to do and be who God has made us to be. We need to look for, and now this is just a general principle that would apply to anybody, right? Because I don't want you to necessarily decide I have to sew by hand even though I have a sewing machine. But I want us to think about it this way. If my phone enables me to pursue the things that God has given me as priorities and calls valuable, then my phone can be a valuable tool. But my valuable tool can also be exploited by the old habits of my heart or the sinful pressures of the world. Think about it this way. Let's use connecting in relationships. Phones can help us connect. Yesterday, my mother-in-law and father-in-law called from 9 hours away, and we talked in some manner face-to-face on FaceTime. What a wonderful gift. It helped us connect with people that we could not have connected with in that way. But you know what? That same device can also keep a group of family members disconnected in the same room. Do you see how that tension has to be clearly stated? And then you and your family have to be wise about the boundaries and wisdom in which you put restrictions on that device so it doesn't reinforce, constrict what God has called you to do. If your phone is enabling you to connect with people that God values and enabling you to communicate with people in a way that brings honor to God, it's enabling you to add value in the way that He intended, that you take some of the capacity He gave you in the small place of responsibility He gave you and reflect His character for His glory. But if it's pulling you out of that, if it's minimizing your capacity by distracting you or dulling you, if it is actually keeping you from your responsibilities, or if it's not adding value, it's taking, and let's just be blunt, like things like pornography are not just distracting you, they're actually destroying you. This is the place where we have to wrestle with how much value do these tools bring. I'll give you an example now that we're going to talk about parenting. Because parents, remember, we're not owners of our children, but we're ambassadors for God. So we want to reflect His priorities, His principles, His word in their lives. We want to cultivate what He believes is important in them. We want to instill what He believes is valuable in them. And we want to see them grow in wisdom and grow in Spirit-filled character, right? That is what God has called parents to do. Not to make their children into themselves, but to make them into who God intended that they be, with their limited capacity, with their specific responsibilities He'll give them, and their reflection of His character, right? And you know what? A lot of times, my children do not have the appropriate responsibilities or the abilities to really justify needing the tools. And all that happens then is they use the tools for the worst possible application, only to distract, only to dull, only to destroy. And your children too. Let's be honest, like if your teenager is about to start working and is going to work in a place that is far away. I have a daughter, and maybe I think, okay, a cell phone is going to add value because I want her to be able to communicate with rides, with us, with their work managers about schedules. I want those things for her, right? But her work life is not it's not a central piece of her life. And she doesn't need that ability to communicate and coordinate and schedule and plan at the same degree that maybe I do or another businessman or woman would need it, right? And at the same time, at her fingertips is the opportunity to be as distracted, as dulled, and as deteriorated or destroyed by those influences, right? I don't have to read you the stats about how many children are exposed to pornography through devices like this. So what's a Christian parent to do? Well, I think that as your children grow, you need to be wrestling with the fact that you are an ambassador for God who's trying to prepare them to work in this way. Not work as just a career job. I'm saying to add value to God's world in the way that He's given them capacity and given them responsibilities and reflect His character. If your 2-year-old is not taking on much responsibility, doesn't have much capacity, Well, maybe they don't need that many tools that have those kind of negative impacts, right? Let's just think about it like this. A gun is a powerful tool. It has some awesome capacity and awesome enabling for the right kind of abilities and destructive force too. And we don't put a gun in the hands of someone who has low discernment, they don't have wisdom or character yet to use it, or we shouldn't, right? So, your phone is every bit as spiritually lethal as any gun you can find, all right? Pornography wants to take your son or daughter right down into the grave, as Proverbs tells us. Cutting, anxiety, so I say cutting because anxiety and teenage anxiety, social media is ready to wrap your heart and your children's hearts in a web of preoccupation with the opinions of others and self-centeredness that is going to be hard to untangle over the course of a life. Yes, does it offer ways to add value? Some. But they require wisdom and they require character. There's a responsibility related to that opportunity. That is the principle that I think should guide us in thinking about our children and how we entrust to them technology. I'll give you a very practical principle that helps me is if it's about adding value, this means that something new is probably a no. And I don't mean that what I mean is this, that the pioneers get the arrows, settlers get the land. That if somebody comes around the corner first, they might be the first to fall off the cliff. Okay? And your children are in a lack of wisdom, going to feel the pressure of their friends around them and of youth to say, this new thing is what I need. And you're not going to have the ability yet to have evaluated how it adds value and where it might distract or destroy. And so I would say, parents, that's a great reason for you to say, no, I need time to evaluate the fruit of this. Does it add value? Does it destroy? For instance, let me give an example. One that's more known, but Snapchat, okay? Where does Snapchat add any meaningful value that couldn't be added through other messaging and other apps and other tools? I'm not sure if it does, but I know that it's built in such a way that it offers and allures in several ways that will destroy. The ability to send inappropriate pictures that disappear. The homepage has a constant barrage of, I would say, demonically inspired worldview. All right, the course of the world, the prince of the power of the air, Ephesians 2, 1 through 3. Your children will be shaped by the world just by having that homepage. Same could be said of a lot of these tools. So but are you going to be compelled as a parent that they really have to add value to the world by sending pictures that disappear immediately? I don't think there's a compelling case there to invite in this great danger. All right. In fact, I'll tell you, I've wrestled this myself. I coach. I'm wearing my soccer gear right now. And during the fall each year, I would get Snapchat so I could connect with my players. And I still, last year, didn't do that because I decided, you know what, I can just overcome some of the other ways. They're on Snapchat, and I want to connect with them. But you know what? I don't want the baggage that's coming through Snapchat. I don't want this. So I'm going to communicate with them in other ways. Parents, these tools are fundamentally about using our capacity and our responsibilities for the glory of God to show his character to the world. That's what you're trying to build and shape in your children. So it's not about which technology is good or bad. It's about the usefulness in adding value and what I mean is even adding that. So some apps have helped me shape my spiritual life because they keep me on a Bible reading plan, or they help me listen to more of God's word, or listen to other good books, or fitness apps that help me run regularly, things like that. That's adding value even to my own life. It's shaping and growing me. Fine. I don't think we have to take a technological, a Mennonite or an Amish approach. But I think we have to be real clear and serious about counting the cost. Is this going to help me? to become who God wants, to reflect more of God's character, to do more of what God called me to do with the responsibilities he's given me, to take my capacity to my responsibilities? Or is it going to distract me from them? Is it going to dull me instead of grow me? Or is it going to erode me, destroy me by bringing things that hurt, that destroy? You think about just your youngest children. Like a piece of technology as simple as an iPad. We all laugh about the way that a refrigerator box or a stick or a time outside, the kids light up. I think in general we should be thinking about these things and thinking, why do I put a screen in front of my kids? To distract, dull, and maybe not destroy, but just to distract them, instead of helping them learn to fill their time with things that are creative, constructive, or stretching. Put them to work before you just put them in front of a screen. Call them to grow. And you know what, parents? Yes, it will require more work from us. But we have a limited window as an ambassador for the Lord. It's an 18-year sprint. And we need to be willing to say, yeah, it does take more energy to take my son or daughter outside and go for a walk or mow the grass together or do a chore or teach them to be creative with their mind in coloring or creating than it does for me to just slap a screen in front of them. It does take more work. But you and I can't give in to the same lie that easier is always better, that a tool helping us to get quiet means that we can just stop. Actually, and I don't mean that you don't do work. Like, rest is a good thing. That's adding value. Okay, so sometimes technology enables you to rest and recover. But it has to be coherently submitted to the Lord. I hope this has been helpful for you, because I believe technology, cell phones, computers, all these things, they are tools, which means they are an expression of our values in our work. The reality of sin in a sin-cursed world is that we actually will use those tools for destruction, for distraction, to dishonor and disregard God if we don't consciously listen to the values that God has in his word and the leading of the Spirit to take them and use them for the glory of God and for the good of others. Teach your children not to be mindlessly dulled by entertainment or technology, not to be enabled to add no value because the robot did it for them, but to be freed up to add more value because of the creativity of this piece of technology. I've been thinking on this. I would tell you this, parents, I want to be done at 25 minutes, so I'll just say this. Andy Crouch has a book called The Tech-Wise Family that gets more into application, and I actually think it's really good. I really enjoyed it, and I am going to link a list of his 10 commitments his family has for tech. They're not for everyone, but I love the way he thinks about it. I'd highly recommend that book if you want to go into a deeper dive on this topic. All right?